Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Restorative Practices and Social Emotional Learning Professional Development. During our time together today, we are going to talk about how our important work around restorative practices fits perfectly with another focus in our district, Social Emotional Learning, or SEL. So today we want to be able to demonstrate how these two seemingly separate efforts actually align, and if we can integrate these efforts with more intention, it will ease the use and the efficiency of implementing both. So we'll start with a quick restorative practices refresher, and then a review of our SEL, and then we're going to dive into our discussion of the two efforts and how they are connected. So before we get started, just a few quick reminders with our Zoom etiquette since we are doing our PD virtually today. Please just make sure you're muted unless you are speaking. If you can please have your video on so we can see you, that would be great. And please engage as much as possible by using our thumbs up or thumbs down, our chat function, and we'll also be using some polls and even a breakout room during our time together today. So first, let's take a look here at our restorative practices refresher. Hopefully all of this looks pretty familiar to you at this point. These images pop up on most all of our restorative practices presentations, but we're still going to go ahead and review each of them together. So first, let's read through this quote here listed. The fundamental premise of restorative practices is that people are happier, more cooperative, and productive, and more likely to make positive changes when those in authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. So this directly speaks to the social discipline window that's also pictured here, and it's one of the foundational pieces of restorative practices. Additionally, the use of our affective statements and questions and using our circles is another significant piece of restorative practices. And remember, this is because building community is 80% of what restorative practices is all about. It's really the science of relationships and community, and it is so important to recognize that restorative practices is not just another program or just another curriculum that's being pushed out, but it really is a philosophy and a way of thinking and being, and it should be who we are as a school and a district. It should really define and guide our school culture and our climate. So as we just mentioned, circles is a big piece of RP, and it's a big piece of building community. It can be a little bit tricky to do this while we're engaging virtually though. So we're going to pause here and just do a few quick examples of simple ways to build that connection and that community in classes while we're Zooming. So first, we're going to use our poll feature. So take a look at the image that you see on your screen right now and let us know how you're feeling today. So number 1 is happy or feeling good. Number 2 is sad, bored, maybe a little bit tired. And number 3 is you're cool and you're just chilling. So be honest, your answers are totally anonymous in the poll. And as you're answering, just keep in mind that polls are a really quick and easy way to check in with your whole class. And there's no need for a camera or a mic. And again, it is anonymous, so there's not that pressure of an individual answer. Okay, so next we are going to practice using our chat feature. So answer this question with one word or one name, no explanation. And the question is, if you could be any character from a TV show, a book, a movie, etc., who would you be? And remember, no explanation. And go ahead and put that in the chat now. As you guys are typing your answers in and maybe reading a few of what your peers have written, just remember that chat is another way to engage without a camera or a mic, but this does get you some more of those individual answers from your students. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and use the breakout room feature. In a moment, the facilitator is going to be randomly assigning everyone to a breakout room for just a few minutes. And while you're there, share with your group what character you chose, and now briefly explain why you chose that character. And if your group does end a little bit early, you can feel free to end that session and rejoin the main session. Okay, so now let's shift gears to social emotional learning, or SEL. So SEL might be new to some, while others might have a little bit more familiarity with it as you're seeing them or facilitating the lessons with your students already. But just to make sure that we're all on the same page, we're going to watch this brief introductory video together. So as we just heard in the video, and now we're seeing here on the wheel pictured, the foundation of social emotional learning are these 5 competencies, or these 5 skills. And again, those are self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So SEL is an integral part of learning and development for both youth and adults. It's a process through which we're all developing healthy identities, we're figuring out how to manage our emotions, and how we make responsible choices. It also helps us figure out how we feel and how we show empathy for others. It plays a huge role in how we establish and maintain healthy relationships with others throughout our lives. And these skills are important because they're a key component or a key ingredient to our success in various aspects of our lives. So as you can see here, all of the different social emotional skills that are being taught are leading right to academic success. And as we move into adulthood, it affects our professional identities, our professional success as well. So just take a moment now and reflect on how you use these skills daily in your own life. So what's the connection? Honestly, integrating SEL goes hand in hand with the use of restorative practices. RP provides students and adults with a positive community. It's a process and an opportunity to put their SEL knowledge and learning into practice. SEL skills also provide a foundation that's really needed to successfully navigate the RP process and everything that kind of comes along with it. So, in a nutshell, restorative practices is the framework or the structure that's created by adults. And then the SEL skills are what students need to learn and what they need in order to be able to participate in the RP process, such as circles, for example. So keep in mind that teachers, much like parents, have a unique opportunity to model these SEL skills on a daily basis to the children who look up to them. Once relationships are in place, your students are able to learn from you, not just what you're teaching explicitly in your content area, but what you're modeling perhaps more implicitly in the way that you demonstrate self-awareness, manage your own emotions, recognize and understand the emotions of others, how you're managing conflicts in your classroom, and so on. These SEL skills are modeled either positively or negatively to your students every day in all of your interactions. During circles, we very intentionally teach these skills. For example, students are looking at one another, they're seeing how others respond to them, and they're expected to listen. So we model empathy and compassion during these circles as well, and so much more. So let's look a little bit closer at these connections and the relationship between restorative practices and social emotional learning. Very simply put, they both support similar outcomes. You can see here there's improved school climate, improved student to student relationships, as well as student and teacher relationships, improved conflict management, and overall just improved student behavior. And overall, that's what restorative practices and social emotional learning are all about. It's that positive approach to student behavior. And this also very easily aligns and supports SDOL's PBIS efforts. So before we move on to our second connection, let's pause here and read this statement. Good relationships need to be at the heart of everything a school does if effective teaching and learning are to take place. So your facilitator will now share a question using the poll feature. Please select yes, no, or somewhat to share if you agree with this statement. And let's take a look how everyone answered. And I also invite you now to either unmute or in the chat type why you chose to agree or disagree with the statement. Okay, so let's move to our second connection. Restorative practices supports our SEL development. And we're going to break this down a little bit. So once adults teach a social skill lesson, efforts often move on to teaching class content, maybe another different SEL skill. However, if the learned skills are not revisited or practiced, students may lose or forget to use them, just like with our academic skills. So we teach the basics and the foundation, and then we build on it. And this is where restorative practice comes in. So take circles, for example. Using circles increases the likelihood that students will use SEL skills because they're being given regular opportunities to talk about and practice them. The circle process provides structure for respectfully listening, gaining insight into how others are feeling, sharing their own feelings and their own experiences, and figuring out how to manage their emotions during those interactions. So again, restorative practices is a process through which SEL skills are further learned and refined. So conversely to that previous point, RP and SEL are connected because having those social emotional skills supports the development of a successful RP implementation. So when students have skills to listen, show empathy, disagree respectfully, establish positive relationships, understand and manage emotions, and handle challenging situations effectively, they can participate in the restorative practice process with more ease and confidence. Remember, we're aiming to be in the with box. Restorative practices really replaces that lens of that punitive disciplinarian practice, and it replaces it with more strategies to build community and relationships. This includes strategies to repair relationships that may have been damaged by conflict. And the ability to build relationships and community is heavily dependent on each individual, both youth and the adults, their social emotional skill set. Social emotional skills are critical to building, maintaining, and repairing relationships. So, in a nutshell, whatever you're doing to strengthen connections and build connections and relationships, SEL skills matter. So, as we mentioned very briefly earlier in the presentation, RP not only supports social emotional learning, but it also directly aligns with other efforts in the district. And you can see the examples listed here. So our implementation of PBIS and MTSS strategies, our equity groups, the attendance improvement efforts, development of career-ready skills, and mindfulness practices. These are all efforts ultimately supporting our overall goal of being a trauma-informed school. We want our students to feel they are in a safe and supportive environment with trusting adults who empower them. So to wrap up today and conclude our restorative practices PD, we'll leave you with this. It's relationships, not programs, that change children. Young people thrive when adults care about them on a one-to-one level and when they have a sense of belonging to a caring community.